Okay. So I will talk about, strictly speaking, I will be comparing face-to-face communication and what comes with it. And when we say face-to-face communication, it is the spoken communication, right? The spoken language, to the something that we can call screen-to-screen communication, right? Which is strictly speaking, written language, but in today's world, we are using screens to communicate much more, right? So, okay, so the outline of the presentation will be, that in the beginning I will talk about the main differences between written
Hi, sorry, Mr. Miss Bojana.
and
We
face to
are
face.
we cannot hear anything. Please, can you raise your voice up?
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
let me see. So you don't hear me?
Yes, madam, you can hear you. So
Okay, you can hear
Your
me?
voice is
Okay.
not clear yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Good afternoon. Really, I had some problems in
It's not
connecting
so.
with
It's
you,
not.
but
I'm hearing you
hope it's
very
okay.
well.
Enough
Yeah. All right.
loud.
Thank you.
Please do not talk all at the same time. If not, we cannot understand anything.
Okay, I think I will just use my headphones that have a better microphone, and then maybe we can do that. Okay, I will be just.
Thank you, Bojana.
okay, thank you.
Is this maybe a little bit better? Okay,
Yes, yes, it's good.
okay. Please let me know. Maybe you can write in the chat if it happens again that the audio is very bad. So thank you for telling me that. I will also try to be a little bit louder, so that you can hear me well. Okay, I will go back to the presentation. Sorry about that little hiccup. Um, okay, so as I said, the comparison will mainly be between the written communication and face-to-face communication. What are the main differences? And we will be focusing on something that is called para-linguistic features. So not strictly linguistic, but more paralinguistic. Then we will talk about how all this details. Um, I am seeing here the messages that the sound is still distant. I don't know
I think
if this.
that must be you guys because I can hear her perfectly. So
Okay.
check your computers. Maybe that's the problem because I
Yes.
don't have any problem listening to her.
Okay. And when I talk like this, is this still okay, Clara, for you?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
loud.
for now,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
it's clear. It's clear. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Then baby try to, I will go ahead and then
yeah.
let's see.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
So how do machines account for all that is not written, right? If we know that um, the models of recognizing language are mainly based on analyzing the written language. I will talk about a little bit about that. And really in relation to these paralinguistic features, I will talk about the sentiment analysis and the emotion analysis in the machine learning. And I will also briefly talk about how we try to mark and to sometimes try to explain these paralinguistic meanings and information in written language. Uh, so so the main differences that we can say that exist between the spoken and written language, first of all, it's a medium, right? So spoken language is spoken. We use our voices for it, and the written language is we use our eyes to receive actually this linguistic information. The very important point is that spoken language is synchronous. What does that mean? That means that you are receiving the language as I speak in the same moment, and you cannot go back to it unless you, I think that this talk is recorded, so if unless you record somebody talking, you cannot go back to it and revisit what has already been said. So you have to, the language processing also works in such a way that you have to understand your mechanisms of understanding the language have to be a little bit more activated, because you know you cannot go back. But that also, if we are conversing, right, there is another point to this synchronicity. And that is that sometimes if you give me feedback or I see reactions, that might actually change what I'm going to say next, right? So this is something that in old school, let's say old school written communication, we don't have all these synchronous effects, the effects of synchronicity. The other point about synchronicity, as I said, is that written language can be revisited and verified, right? It stays recorded. Whereas when we say something, it's past, it's ephemeral, right? It passed, the moment passed, I said it already. And as such, it's very susceptible to noise. So if you in that, when I say noise, I mean physical noise. For example, if you don't hear me well because this room is very loud, you might have problems to understand me. In written communication, we don't have that, right? And also noise such as the psychological noise. For example, if you lose the attention just for a brief second, you might miss a couple of words or even a sentence, which doesn't happen with written communication. So all these are the differences between these two. And most importantly, spoken language is multimodal. As you can see, I'm using my hands a lot when I speak. So spoken language is not just what you hear, it's also what you see. So something that I won't be talking about today too much, because I also talked in the previous lectures, is our gestures and body language. This conveys a lot of information. It contains information about what we want to accentuate, how we feel about the topic that we are saying, etc. But there is something in between the language that is being spoken and something very non-verbal, such as gestures. There is something in between. And that something in between is called paralinguistic information or paralinguistic features. Para means that it's out of it, right? It's not the part of linguistic feature, but is directly related to it. And David Crystal, who is a very important linguist because he wrote the Encyclopedia of Linguistics and is working a lot on popularization of linguistics, says that it's sort of a bridge. Paralanguage is a bridge between non-linguistic forms of communication and linguistic, traditionally linguistic forms such as grammar, vocabulary. And I will explain how. The most important thing is that these paralinguistic features contribute a lot to the emotive, emotional, or attitudinal quality of an utterance of what we say, right? And this is not the complete list. These are the most, let's say, important paralinguistic features. That is the pitch of the voice or of the word, the tempo or the rhythm by which we are speaking, the hesitation and pauses that have to do with the tempo, the loudness of speech, the enunciation, and the intonation range, right? So these are all the ways, these are all the features of our speech that carry a lot of meaning, that are not strictly speaking linguistic. What that means is that you can have the same sentence, which is linguistically, so the content of the words is exactly the same, but you can have the same sentence pronounced with different paralinguistic features and you might get a completely different meaning out of it. Maybe not completely different, but different kinds of meaning. At some point, you might understand that the person likes the topic of the conversation. If the sentence is pronounced differently, you might understand that the person dislikes it. You might understand that the person hates it, that the person is angry about it, that the person is not sure about it, so the person is making a lot of pauses, etc., etc. These are all the types of information and pieces of information that are actually encoded in speech that are not true for written language. So I will just explain some. The pitch is very important. The pitch is actually how high or low the tone is within one word. And pitch, acoustically speaking, is just the vibration of your vocal cords. If they vibrate slower, we get low, we have deep low voices, right? And deep low pitch. Also, there's a difference between the voice and a pitch. One person with a high pitch voice can also speak differently, right? So if there are more vibrations, the pitch is higher. So the pitch is different from, it's a linguistic tone rather than loudness, how loud I speak or how long I pronounce a word. This is just a pitch, how I pronounce it. Now, I wrote here, it is not so paralinguistic in some languages because there are some languages where the pitch, whether I pronounce, I will give you an example here soon. How I pronounce a word can change the meaning. These are called the pitch accent languages. My native language is Serbian. So if we say something that is written the same, I can say look, or I can say look. It is going to be two different things, right? One is onion, and the other one is an arrow. And a bow, actually, not an arrow. So this is when paralinguistic, so to say, features can actually mean a lot. And we also have traditionally tonal languages such as Vietnamese or Chinese, where the way you pronounce, they have 4 different tones, and the way you pronounce the same word can completely change, mean another thing. It's a completely different word, right? But pitch can also be used paralinguistically, right? If we want to accentuate something, if we want to put focus on a word, right? And if we would look at the pitch of the entire sentence, let's say a pitch of the entire sentence, so the changes in the pitch throughout the sentence, this is something that we call intonation, right? And we all know that intonation can change the same sentence a lot. So if I say, it is raining, and if I say, it is raining, it is a completely different meaning. This is the pitch on the level of the sentence. So you can see how changing my voice with the same linguistic material can mean a lot. Tempo and rhythm are a little bit harder to determine. Let's say that the tempo in musical terms is the number of something per minute or number of words within a given time. And how they are organized. There are differences between the languages here. Languages have different tempos and rhythms. And then on top of that, a person can speed up or a person can slow down. Pardon. And this can tell us something about the speaker's mood, for example, or the attitudes towards the spoken words. For example, I speak a little bit slower today than usually because I am sick, but I speed up when I want to make a point and when I want to explain something quickly, and then when I come to the very important part, I slow down. So this is how tempo and rhythm can also tell us about the attitudes, what I think about what I'm saying, right? Related to that, are pauses or hesitations or even silences, longer silences in speech. This reflects the mood of the speaker a lot. It can mean that what I'm going to say next is very important for me, so I'm preparing for it. But it can also mean that I am feeling uneasy, so I don't know what to say, or I am unsure about what I'm going to say, right? This is why I'm making pauses. Again, as we see, the combination of the rhythm and tempo with the pauses and hesitation is reflective of the attitude of the speaker. Finally, loudness or volume um, affects a lot our perception of the speaker, right? There are again cultural differences, but we usually think that when somebody is speaking louder, we perceive it as more aggressive. When somebody is speaking quietly, we perceive it as unsure, nervous, something like that, right? And it also says something about the intention of the speaker. Right now, I'm talking loudly. I increased my volume on purpose because I really want you to hear me well. But sometimes when I am not sure about something and I don't really want the other person to understand perfectly what I said, I will just mumble it very quietly, right? So it also tells us something about the intentions of the speaker, right? So now these are only some. As I said, there are more, such as enunciation. Enunciation is how clearly we articulate our speech apparatus, so that what is being said is very clear to the listeners, which is what I'm trying to do now, or whenever I'm presenting something, or any of us. Whereas when we are in an informal setting, we might say that we don't care about the enunciation so much when we are chit chatting with our friends over a coffee, right? So it can tell you that I am trying to, that the situation is a bit more formal, as I am trying for everyone to understand me. Okay, so these are some of most of these you probably already thought about or knew about or were aware of, but these are some of the paralinguistic features of our speech that are not concerned with written language. The question is now, how do we train the machines to understand all this, right? So the problem here is, of course, I mean, machine learning and speech recognition has gone through many phases, and right now we have models that are quite advanced. Now, first of all, to give a little bit of intro here, what I'm going to talk about is usually the speech recognition. As you know, the artificial intelligence models have ways of understanding speech. And what they usually do is when people speak in their microphones in their computers, the models translate the spoken language into written material and then analyze it, right? So let's say that the traditional way is to turn speech, spoken language, for example, when you say, Alexa, bring me, play something, something, or search machine learning in 2024. Um, it is first, the spoken language is first translated into text, usually, and then analyzed. When I say analyzed, I mean the machine is analyzing it in order to understand the command or any kind of manipulation of the speech afterwards, right? I will show you today that it's not always such. So it's not always that the spoken language is translated into text. It's sometimes people analyze speech directly. But this is what's usually happening, right? And one thing that might be right now, I mean, the first models were concerned more with analyzing the speech, with the syntax, the morphology, the vocabulary, etc. But what is becoming more and more important nowadays, especially in the context of using artificial intelligence and these machine learning models for all kinds of aspects, right? For example, you open a website and you have a chatbot there, right? Sometimes you have to, so this is some kind of customer service approach, right? So all the language that you input is being analyzed by these artificial intelligence models, so that they understand in the best way what you want. That's in the end the goal of all this, right? Even when you say, Alexa, play this and that song, that the machine understands exactly what you want as precisely as possible, right? But in order to tell the machine how to understand the language input based on what we know about the language, we first have to understand the language. And as a linguist, I have to tell you, we are not 100% sure about many things. So we have to guess and train models, people who are working with machines, to train models more and more to see how they improve by adding more and more information about about the language material. And one of them is called one of the analysis that is being done of the inputs to the machines, to the AI systems, is called sentiment analysis, right? And this refers to the use of all kinds of algorithms, natural language processing, and machine learning that uses both text analysis, computational linguistics, etc., to systematically, because everything has to be systematically when we're talking about artificial intelligence, right? You input the parameters and train the model to identify the affective states and subjective information. This is what I was talking about, what is being said besides what is being written, right? And this is also called sometimes opinion mining or emotion AI, right? Trying to detect the opinions or attitudes of the people who put some input to the AI machine. So when you ask something to Alexa, Alexa wants to not just understand the words that you said, but maybe something about your attitudes towards it, or all kinds of different information that might not be so straightforward. And some possible applications nowadays, very much, as I said, in customer service and customer materials. For example, you have all these websites that ask you to do review of something, survey response. So what they try to do is to understand what your attitude was beyond what you wrote or what you said, right? The other application is also on online and social media to try to understand attitudes of people or feelings of people based on what they wrote, but not exactly only what they wrote. And sometimes even in healthcare materials. So these are only some of the some of the applications of this sentiment analysis that we are working with today. So why is it important? As I said, nowadays we use AI for everything, and companies are using AI to get as much information about customers as they can, right? So this is why they want to get into the customer's sentiment. When I say customers, it's all the user. Either you're a user of a tool, of a software, or of a product that you bought, and then you go to their website and try to give feedback. Using sentiment analysis can provide a little bit more information to the brands, to the businesses, so that they can improve their products, so that the customers are happier, etc., etc. It's a way of brand monitoring, where you can get more objective insights. more insights for sure, whether they're objective, I don't know. And to finally build better products and services and sell more, right? So sentiment analysis is actually very important for businesses. Now, so how does it work? And this is what I said, what traditionally has been done in the sentiment analysis. So the way it worked is to try to analyze these attitudes and affective states, as I said, of the people who are using the product or who are inputting the language material. Excuse me. When they are writing the text. So this is traditionally based on text itself. In linguistics, we call it discourse analysis, to try to understand the complexity of, with using a complex system of different discourse analysis tools to go deeper into what's being said, to detect some sort of emotions or sentiments, right? To interpret joy, anger, sadness, regret through the specific choice of words only. I think I talked about the 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 discourse analysis at some point, and I think I said, for example, there is a reason why you would choose, I don't know, a word. You're talking about somebody and you said dude instead of a boy, right? So although it's kind of similar, there's a reason why you said that. So it kind of probably reflects that you feel very informal towards that person, that you are friends, etc., right? So imagine when you combine all, like look at texts and a lot of data and try to analyze text in such a level, you can gain some insights into the attitudes of the person who is speaking or writing, right? This is speech to text transformation first and then analyzed. But this is still with the linguistic information, as I said. So looking at the words of what is being used. What about all those paralinguistic information that I told you? So the pitch, the intonation, the pauses, the tempo, the enunciation, etc., the volume of the voice. This is still all very informative for us. But how do we get it if these, AI models are only using the written language? If they heard, for example, me saying, Alexa, play the song, it was transferred into written language. It means that in this transferring of spoken language to written language, we lost a lot of information. We lost all this paralinguistic information, right? So, of course, people who are working in machine learning and artificial intelligence figured that out. And they said, how about we try approach to understand people's emotions and attitudes towards things? How about we try to analyze not written speech, but actually the pronounced speech, right? And indeed, this is a paper from 2017. So there has been a lot of progress since then, but I thought it was an interesting example that automatic, that there are some steps are made to try to train a machine to recognize these paralinguistic nuances. And these automatic speech recognition approaches are trying to recognize emotions from speech by analyzing both linguistic, which was what we previously said, which words are used, how you structured your sentences, etc., and paralinguistic information. In this particular paper, which was written by Papakostas and colleagues, it was a conference paper, and they tried to make it very, as I said, we want to make it systematic, right? So we want to train a machine to be able to recognize it across people and languages, etc. So they did include several languages, Italian, English, German. And what they did is that they tried to look at the speech. So what I'm showing here, oops, what I'm showing here is something called spectrogram. Spectrogram is a graphic or visual representation of the voice. So this is probably over a sentence or maybe averaged over the entire text. I don't know how much speech was exactly for this spectrogram, how much it was analyzed. But what they found is that different patterns of voice changes that give rise to these different spectrograms can be correlated with sadness, happiness, anger, and neutral, right? So what they realized, of course, is that, wow, this is very difficult. And why is it difficult? It's difficult because these things differ across languages, as well as, languages differ, also even gestures differ. I think we also talked about it at some point. And paralinguistic information differs too, right? Not every, for example, let's talk about the intonation of a sentence. Not every language uses the same intonation when you are surprised, for example, to determine a surprise. In my language, you would say something, what, you did that? And you would use that kind of intonation. But maybe in some other languages you would do it differently, right? Well, for sure. So when they were trying to analyze this, they realized that there's really, maybe the way to go is to do it separately for each language, etc. It's really hard. And then there is a lot of deviation between and variation between different people. So it's hard to generalize. But the point is, the good news is that this is for me a good example of how we can bridge still that gap that we have between how machines talk and understand language and how humans talk and understand the language, right? And especially if we talk about these different applications that are now existing for the artificial intelligence, we can see how, in looking at how humans actually communicate and what they communicate without specifically saying it, can help us understand the customers much better when using AI tools, right? Not just relying on written information. So this paper is one of the first ones that, well, not one of the first ones, but one of the important ones that introduced this. But of course, since then, we had more development in this field. And I think that for me, this is how it should go. Nowadays, we have very smart deep learning and models that that are better at recognizing emotions. So emotion recognition is just, let's say, a part of the sentiment analysis. I think it's a much more complicated process to understand emotions, to understand the sentiment. But both are being worked on in this field of artificial intelligence and using AI in your business. And something that I wanted to, I think we will finish a little bit earlier than usual today, but this is something I wanted to finish on because all the time I have been talking about how we have all this paralinguistic information in spoken language, but we don't do anything in written language to do it. But there are some actually minimal things that we are doing. For example, we are using spaces between words, right? The spaces between words are a written language equivalent of making breaks between words, right? So this is something that we use, and we also use punctuation symbols such as exclamation mark, question mark. This is something that that indicates what kind of statement I'm making, right? So in written language, we can indeed understand if something, this is not true in all languages. There's also, again, let's say in English we do. But I can distinguish even in written language whether something is a question or it's not, right? Because we do have that. In some other languages, for example, some of you are speakers of Spanish. In Spanish, they mark the part of the sentence which is the question, right? So you have at the beginning of the phrase, at the end of the phrase, you have a question mark to better determine what part is actually a question. But as you see, this is very limited in comparison with what we have in spoken language. There are some other. What is very interesting to me is that written communication is nowadays actually mostly happening on the screens, right? And this is why I call this talk face to face or screen to screen. And nowadays, written communication has advanced a lot. Let's talk about a comparison between letters, writing letters, and writing messages to your friend in, Messenger or chat, right? And what it's becoming more synchronous, right? What that means is that when we are chatting, it's happening so fast when we are chatting and using written language to communicate, or messages, WhatsApp, different kinds of applications, that it's becoming to look more like spoken communication on this aspect of synchronicity, right? So some of the aspects of spoken communication, such as the feedback, the reactions, talking right away, this is present in this type of written communication. And with that, this written communication that is happening today, using our computers and mobile phones, is becoming in some aspects, a little bit more like spoken, by adding some of these paralinguistic features. And this is a very informal slide that I will show now. But I think that nowadays, and I'm sure that yeah, people who are teenagers have even more examples, but I'm a little bit now uh, old school and outdated with how now in the communication we are doing everything to try to communicate this paralinguistic information when we are writing. So besides blank spaces and punctuation that I mentioned, people started using other methods to mark paralinguistic information in written language. For me, one of the more interesting ones is that capital letters are sometimes used, and this I say sometimes because it's not a universal code that everybody understands, but very often capital letters mean you are yelling, right? When you write everything in capital letters, or you want to accentuate, so you're adding pitch or stress or some kind of loudness to a certain word when you use capital letters. People use a lot of dot 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 to to mark these pauses or hesitations. And for me, something that I think that is trying to do this, but in a different way, are emojis, right? So we are using emojis more and more in written communication, and you can see how it worked out. I mean, imagine when somebody made emojis in these applications, I don't know, tens of years ago, they didn't know whether it will catch, right? Whether people will actually like to use it. But people like, the kids nowadays especially, like using emojis a lot because they felt that in written communication they had the need to mark their emotions, because written communication is so limited. These emojis kind of jumped in um, to um, to mark these additional meanings that we didn't have just with written communication. So for me, this is this is an interesting point of discussion for me as a linguist, because I can see how written language is trying to develop in the direction of the spoken language, especially just specifically in these aspects where I need to mark sentiment, emotion, my attitudes towards what I'm saying. This is something that it looks like people nowadays, it looks like we need it, right? We need to add that, because just language is not important. And so here I would end. Thank you very much for this, for your attention. And if you have any questions, I think I